Okay guys, you've decided to lose some fat so that your muscles look more defined. And you know that losing weight is not a big deal. However, when you lose weight, yes, you lose some fat, but you lose some muscle tissue as well. And you don't want this. You want to preserve as much muscle tissue as possible. So how can you actually do this? How can you preserve as much muscle tissue as possible when you cut? Before my transformation, when I managed to drop my body fat from 10 to 5% in 2 months, I made some research and I found out that when you cut, if you want to preserve as much muscle tissue as possible, you should increase your protein intake. Let me give you the following example. Let's assume that you need 2,500 calories per day to maintain your weight. And a good macronutrient ratio for maintaining is 30% protein, 40% carbs and 30% fats. And this macronutrient ratio means that 30% of the calories you consume in a particular day should come from protein, 40% of the calories you consume should come from carbs, and 30% of the calories you consume should come from fats. So, when we do some calculations, we see that 750 calories should come from protein, 1000 calories should come from carbs, and 750 calories should come from fats, in order for you to maintain your weight in the best way possible. We know that 1 gram of protein has 4 calories, 1 gram of carbs has 4 calories as well, and 1 gram of fat has 9 calories. And after some more calculations, we see that you need 187.5 grams of protein, 250 grams of carbs, and 83.3 grams of fat to maintain your weight in the best way possible. In order to lose weight, you should create a caloric deficit. And let's say that you decide to create a caloric deficit of 500. Which means that instead of consuming 2,500 calories per day, you consume 2,000 calories. And you keep everything else the same. You don't change the level of your physical activity or anything like this. You keep everything else constant. If you decrease all your macronutrients by an equal amount of 20%, our new macronutrient intake will be 150 grams of protein, 200 grams of carbs, and approximately 66.7 grams of fat. And when we do the calculations, just to make sure that we get 2000 calories, we see that actually everything adds up to 2000 calories. So, if you decrease all your macronutrients by an equal amount of 20%, you'll create a caloric deficit of 500, and you'll lose some weight. Note that I said weight. You lose some fat, but you lose some muscle tissue as well. So, instead of decreasing all macronutrients by an equal amount, you should increase your protein intake and you should decrease your carbs intake. So, instead of eating 150 grams of protein, you may eat 200 grams of protein. Instead of eating 200 grams of carbs, you will eat 140 grams of carbs. And your fats will be 71.1 grams. So that when we do the calculations, everything will add up to 2000 calories. When we do some more calculations, we see that our macronutrient ratio is 40% protein, 28% carbs, and 32% fats, which is a pretty good ratio. When your aim is fat loss, your macronutrient ratio should be between 40 and 50% protein, between 10 and 30% carbs, and between 30 and 40% fat. So actually, you can manipulate the numbers above. For example, you can decide to increase your protein intake even further to, let's say, 240 grams per day, decrease your carbs intake to 100 grams, and your fats will not change. And when we calculate the new macronutrient ratio, we will get 48% protein, 20% carbs, and 32% fat, which is a pretty good ratio too. So actually, you can manipulate the numbers, just make sure that when you add up the percentages, they will add up to 100%. I hope you got the idea. Basically, when you cut, if you want to preserve as much muscle tissue as possible, you should increase your protein intake. Remember this, when you increase your protein and when you decrease your carbs, it is really important to keep eating at least 70 grams of fat per day. And I'm not talking about fried chicken, fried chips or anything like this. I'm talking about healthy fats, like olive oil, nuts, seeds. If your fat intake is low, you destroy your hormones. Your hormones will not function properly. And when you decrease your carbs, it gets even more important to keep eating fats. So don't go below 70 grams of fat per day. Okay guys, that was that. This was the most important thing when you cut. Increase your protein, decrease your carbs, and make sure you eat at least 70 grams of fat per day. I hope you found this video useful. See you soon.